Hi, I'm Caden here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have our NFL Week 12 recap for the 2024 season. But before we get sliding straight into those recaps, just a quick few tidbits of news, starting off with the New York Jets and Daniel Jones splitting ways. Daniel Jones, the quarterback, is now a free agent, no longer with the New York Giants, not the Jets, one of those New York teams with a questionable quarterback. But Daniel Jones is no longer with the New York Giants as their quarterback, and actually at time of recording this on Tuesday night at about 7:30 Central Time, he has still not picked a new location either. A couple of different speculations, big time. Callan mentioned the Jets right before God, why can I not seem to get the Jets off my head? Callan mentioned the Las Vegas Raiders right before we started, which I think is a pretty obvious landing spot.
The Jets would be interesting.
The Jets would surely be interesting as well. Actually, hell, I mean, let's have some real fun. Let's throw him in there. I mean, maybe you could even throw him in as like a change of pace guy, as a pure running quarterback. You know what? I was about to say the Niners ring chasing is my guess, but never mind. He's staying in New York. My guess for Daniel Jones is that he signs with the New York Jets. I didn't even mean to say it, but I actually love it. I guess it was like an intrusive thought, like a subconscious thought. But no. All jokes aside, he has not signed anywhere yet, but it should be very interesting to see where Daniel Jones ends up landing. And a sadder bit of news with a injury, veteran Brandon Graham of the Philadelphia Eagles will be missing the rest of the season with an injury as well. So sucks to see anybody go down for the whole season, but especially a veteran whose years are numbered to begin with. So now we will move on past the news and into the games, starting with Callan in the Green Bay Packers game. We had the San Francisco 49ers head to the Tundra to take on the Green Bay Packers, and the Green Bay Packers dominate at home by a score of 38-10.
Yes, this was a very dominating win. Slight asterisk with Brock Purdy being ruled out about 3/4 of the way through the week. They didn't tell Brandon Allen that he was starting until Friday. So, that definitely tips the scales in the Packers' favor. But definitely, I think they would have won this game regardless if Purdy plays or not. Maybe it's a little bit closer, and that's about it. But the Packers' defense was unstoppable, forcing 3 turnovers, 2 fumbles, including one on Christian McCaffrey and another interception for Xavier McKinney, now his league-leading 7th after not getting one for the past 3 games.
Poor guy.
I know.
Had to go 3 whole games without an interception.
And then another dominating performance by Josh Jacobs, who went over 100 yards, and it was the first time the San Francisco have allowed a 100-yard rusher, and I want to say 35 games.
Damn.
It was quite a streak that was broken for Josh Jacobs and the San Francisco 49ers. So really, he was the MVP of this game. Josh Jacobs was. He was catching the ball, running up the gut, running around the off tackle. He was really the star of this game. And Jordan Love did have a touchdown pass. He had no interceptions, which is the first time this year that he has had a game with no interceptions. So, hopefully he's turning that corner. But other than that, there wasn't too much excitement for the 49ers. They only put up 10 points, and the Packers were able to win this one by the largest margin in the 49ers-Packers rivalry history by a 28-point victory.
Damn. Wow. Yeah. I don't really have a ton to say about this game. There's kudos to the Packers. They played literally a perfect game. They didn't even need to, but they pretty much played a perfect game. They had very few mistakes, very few anything, and they took advantage of every single mistake from that beat-up 49ers team. But my kind of big takeaway from this game, or I guess not even a takeaway, but a question, is I just don't understand how as the 49ers you don't start Josh Dobbs. Like we were talking about it a little bit before we started recording, but unless I'm missing something, Josh Dobbs is on your roster. this is an exact situation he was in only a year ago, if even, maybe even like right at a year ago that he was with the Vikings, where he had barely been with the team, but he still came out and found ways to win games.
Mm-hmm.
The Packers' kryptonite over the past 5-10 years has been rushing quarterbacks, which is pretty much all Josh Dobbs would be able to do at that point with how little he knew the offense and how little actual passing ability he has at the end of the day compared to other starting NFL quarterbacks. So I don't understand how you really, on Friday, when Purdy got ruled out, looked at Brandon Allen and said, you're our better chance of winning over Josh Dobbs. But whatever made them think it, it's what they went with. They reaped what they sowed, and it was not very good for them. It clearly was a 20-point loss. I think it's still a loss probably if Josh Dobbs plays, but is it a 28-point loss?
The way the Packers played.
I don't think so. I think it's a much closer game. But like I just said, at the end of the day, I don't think that little asterisk or that little mark in the win column changes for the Packers.
No. Most of the 49ers defense was active, and the way Josh Jacobs was playing, there wasn't anybody stopping him last Sunday.
Yeah, he was absolutely killing it. So now moving on to our next game, just a little kind of note before we start with this one. I realized today, as right before we started recording, that we did not mark a game of the week last week. So since we have hindsight in our pockets now, and this probably was the game of the week regardless, thought we would just make things a little more simplified and combine both the Vikings game and the game of the week. So for both the Vikings game and the game of the week this week, we have the Minnesota Vikings heading to Chicago to take on the Bears and picking up an overtime road win by a score of Minnesota 30, Chicago 27. And this just came down to the most ridiculous thing you can possibly imagine and the most Minnesota Vikings thing you can possibly imagine. And that is 17 unanswered points in the fourth quarter to one of the worst offenses week over week this year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why the Vikings can't just have an easy win. I mean, we go into the fourth quarter up by 17, or up by 14 rather, and we strike first with a field goal in the fourth quarter. Everything is rolling our way. It looks like the easiest win ever. But then we follow that up by allowing a touchdown, a 2-point, an onside recovery, and a game-tying field goal, all within the last 2 minutes. But then the weirdest thing happens. The Bears really showed their true colors. Well, either the Bears showed their true colors or the Vikings finally got their shit together, for lack of a better term, because in overtime, it looked like it had looked the entire rest of the game. I mean, the Vikings defense went out there and just absolutely stomped them. Mm-hmm. The Bears looked like they could do nothing. And then the offense got the ball and just drove right down the field, got a chip shot field goal for Romeo. I mean, it was just such a, I don't know why, it's so irritating that the Vikings can't just put a full game together. If we could play like we played in quarters 2, 3, and overtime of this game, all 4 quarters every game, we are an undefeated team atop the NFC North. The Lions aren't even being talked about because the Vikings are playing so well. But we just don't have the consistency to do that. And I don't even overly necessarily blame them because it's kind of a Cinderella story already. On paper, we shouldn't even be doing as well as we are, so it's hard to ask for more. But it's just, as a Vikings fan, it's so annoying to see what we can play like and then what we do play like some of the other quarters. But nonetheless, I will never complain about a win in the win column, especially when it comes to a divisional win and especially when we're this far into the playoff hunt.
Yeah, this was a nice win for the Vikings when it all comes down to it. Now, when they allowed 17 unanswered points, a 2-point conversion, an onside kick, I haven't seen that since Green Bay, Seattle 2014. And that was very haunting.
Saw how that ended, yeah.
So that did not go well for the NFC North on that side. But that just shows how far apart that happens for those comebacks like that to happen. And the Bears just kind of went flat in overtime. I don't know if they just spent all their energy coming back or what it is. You know, they had all the momentum, just like the Vikings had all the momentum, and it just swapped just like that. So really, this was another good game by Jordan Addison, who is really showing up in the last couple of weeks that he's a true number 2 wide receiver for the Vikings, because the Bears were able to shut down Justin Jefferson, holding him to, I believe, only 1 catch. if I'm not mistaken.
I
So
think 2, but still,
maybe 2, but he didn't have anywhere near the type of game he usually has. But Jordan Addison had the type of game that Justin Jefferson usually has. I know he had at least 1 touchdown.
Yep, he had a touchdown, and I want to say over 150.
Yeah, I know he had a lot of yards, and I thought he had a touchdown. So I didn't see a whole lot of this game, just what it was on Red Zone, and that was what I saw the most. That really stuck out to me was Jordan Addison's performance.
Yeah, first of all, nothing taken away from Jalen Johnson. I think Jalen Johnson's one of the most underrated cornerbacks in the league. That guy is absolutely locked down. But the biggest reason Jefferson got shut down is A, Jalen Johnson was on him, and B, Jalen Johnson plus 1 to 2 safeties every single play was on him. So all we have to do is ask Jordan Addison in games like that where they're shutting down Justin Jefferson is to go out and win one-on-one matchups. And it's so nice to see it because week in and week out, he does. When he gets put in the situation where he has to go one-on-one with Kyler Gordon or the slot corner or whatever safety they put on him, and he just burns them no matter who they put on him every single time. It's so great to see. And it just shows teams that it's like, put 2 guys on Justin Jefferson, put 3 guys on Justin Jefferson. We'll win other places because, I mean, TJ Hawkinson stepped up and had a big game as well. Other receivers stepped up as kind of that wide receiver 3 role, as kind of a wide receiver 3 by committee for the Vikings right now, but all those guys got some touches. So the offense is clicking. You just got to stop those stupid quarters. That's what I'm going to start calling them this year. It's just the stupid quarters. Because it's we just go stupid in these random quarters, and the 4th quarter was one of them. Only reason this thing was even a game, but nonetheless a win. So I digress. So now moving on to our marked game of the week, starting with Callan's pick for game of the week. We had the Thursday night football game of the divisional matchup, and the Pittsburgh Steelers heading to Cleveland to take on the Browns. And the Browns picking up a upset win at home by a score of 24-19.
Yeah, and this was in snowy Cleveland, where each quarter it got a little bit more snowy. If you looked at picture by picture, it was kind of funny because each quarter picture had a little bit more snow on the ground. And by the time the 4th quarter came, they were in a damn near snow globe. Yep. So it was really a very entertaining, very fun game to watch. Jameis Winston, the eater of W's, he ordered one off Amazon, and it got there just in time, right around 9 o'clock, as he predicted. So, really another good game by Nick Chubb, who had not only the go-ahead touchdown, but 2 touchdowns in total, and had almost 100 yards. Not quite, so he's really getting back into form. Look for him to break 100 and have touchdowns here soon. And look for the Browns to really start turning it around, especially as Nick Chubb gets back into his midseason form, where he did miss most of this season coming off that ACL injury. But the word is that he's been healthy, he looks healthy, and he's playing healthy. And when he makes the Browns a better team, and then he makes Jameis Winston a better quarterback. And also, this was a nice game by Myles Garrett, who outshined T.J. Watt, who only had a couple of tackles, to Myles Garrett, I want to say 2 or 3 sacks.
3 sacks at least, and 2 or 3 tackles for losses.
Yeah, I know he had a much bigger game than T.J. Watt. So I knew he had at least a few sacks. I couldn't remember the tackles for loss. But nonetheless, a very good game by him, and really another superstar moment for Myles Garrett to show why he's the perennial defensive player of the year. And we'll see if that defense is able to keep up that momentum. They could really be unstoppable with Myles Garrett leading the way. And look for the Browns to, like I said, turn it around and possibly make another late playoff run.
No way. I'd love to see it more than anything else, but they'd have to win out to even have a chance. And even if they win out, it's still just a chance. So I can't imagine
AFC's tough this year.
But God, it would be funny to watch. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, I can't remember exactly what I was going to say, but to kind of just go to my side of things, I think that this game, I remember what I was going to say now before I move on. I can't remember exactly what he said word for word, but there was a post-game interview from Myles Garrett where he was like, all the love in the world for TJ Watt, all the respect in the world for TJ Watt, where he pretty much said, I'm him. Like the defensive player of the year
Yeah.
runs through me.
Yeah, he's
And
like,
I just
I'm
love
number
that.
one or
Yeah,
something like that.
that sort of confidence, especially after a big game like that, and knowing like what you are, knowing that you are just more physically gifted than the super athletes you're playing around is such a crazy concept to think
Mhm.
about. But I really like Myles Garrett. I think for how good he is, he's even saying stuff like that for the most part. He's pretty humble about it because he could go out there and be a lot more cocky. I can tell you that. But yeah, to kind of get to my reaction to the game, I give a lot of credit to Jameis Winston, lots of credits to the offense, lots of credit to Jerry Jeudy, who had a huge game and his first huge game pretty much since he was in a Broncos uniform, to be honest. So good to see him finally starting to pick things up in Cleveland. But the defense is what won this game for the Browns. As a whole, they played like they played last year. They said this stat a few times during the game that I heard him say, but last year, I think the Browns were #1 scoring defense, if I'm not mistaken.
I think
And
they
this
were.
year, they dropped down into, it was either high teens or early 20s of teams. But they played in that Thursday night game like they were the #1 scoring defense. Because, I mean, the Steelers had no excuses. The weather sucked. They were on the road. I guess those are basic excuses. But, like, injury-wise,
They were healthy.
short week-wise, anything like that, they were completely healthy. They weren't coming off of a short week, or at least not any shorter of a week than the Browns were.
Mhm.
They had no true excuses, and the Browns just absolutely shut them down on the defensive side of the ball. So it was really cool to see for Cleveland to kind of truly return to old form, to last year's form, with having a defensive performance and a Nick Chubb performance like that.
Mhm.
So can't say that I'm going to predict a playoff runs or anything by the Browns because it's just so unlikely. But I will say that it would be pretty cool to see. I'll admit that any day. So now moving on to our final game here and kind of the other bookend of the week. For my game of the week pick, I picked the Monday night football game with the Baltimore Ravens heading to Los Angeles to take on the Chargers, and the Ravens picking up a road win by a score of 30-23. Now, this was a hell of a game, and it actually, at one point, looked like the Chargers were going to kind of run away with it. They jumped out into a relatively quick 7-0 lead with a good opening drive,
Mhm.
and then also picked up the second score of the game with a field goal, making it 10-0. And then the Ravens were able to come back a little bit, picked up a touchdown of their own, but then the Chargers were able to answer again with a field goal right before halftime. And then Ravens picked up 14 straight, but then the Chargers were able to stop momentum rather with a field goal before halftime. So just the first half was absolutely crazy, and then the second half was just as good. I mean, these were two teams that really were just battling it out for a playoff spot at this point, with how the brackets or how the picture is starting to kind of come together a little more week after week. Both of these teams are really in the heat and not winning their division right now. So that's been kind of an interesting thing right there. I think the Ravens actually might be winning their division now, with the Steelers just recently losing last week and then winning now. But nonetheless, a very tight division there in the AFC North regardless.
Mhm.
But yeah, the Chargers really impressed me in this game. I know they lost. I know it was a home loss, but they are coming together and they're really playing as a team, which is what you need to do. I always call them the Vikings of the AFC. And I mean, it's like a mirror this year between the Vikings and the Chargers. I mean, if you look at on paper how they should be performing and how they actually are performing in the playoff scenario they're in right now, they're really identical. The big question mark for the Chargers coming into this season was, how are the receivers going to do? I mean, Quentin Johnson was questionable. Josh Palmer was kind of questionable on how he would do. Your two rookies, Brendan Rice and Ladd McConkey, both had upside, but you had no idea how they were going to do. And Quentin Johnston has definitely still been questionable. There's been no doubt about that. But Josh Palmer has been a really reliable possession receiver, and Ladd McConkey has kind of stepped up as the #1 in that offense. He has been absolutely killing it. The relationship that him and Justin Herbert have put together and the trust that Herbert is already able to put into Ladd McConkey has been really cool to see out of a guy who was kind of thought to just be kind of like a slot receiver, possession receiver coming out. The fact that he's able to find some success on the outside is really cool to see. So sorry to kind of gush about the Chargers on a game where the Ravens won. Nothing against them at all. They are definitely one of the top tier teams in the NFL. But this game was a really good game overall and should be really good for the Ravens heading forward.
Yeah, it was a nice win for Baltimore, and it was actually the third win for John Harbaugh in the Harbaugh Bowl. He's 3-0 against Jim Harbaugh. So I believe he's the little brother
To be honest, I have no idea.
I can't remember, but either way, one brother has really dominated this matchup over the past years that they've met. Obviously, going back to the Jim Harbaugh's 49er days, but it was really a good game by Lamar Jackson, who showed that he is probably another MVP candidate. It kind of goes back and forth each week between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson for me, because each performance is like, yeah, he deserves it, and then they perform, and it's like, yeah, he kind of deserves it, and then you kind of remember, oh yeah, Josh Allen, we'll see what he does next Sunday night. So it'll be interesting to see those two battle it out for this MVP race down the stretch here. But really, another nice win for the Ravens. They continue to stack wins and come back from that 0-2 start and show that they really were able to shake off any kind of downtroddenness they had. And this was a really nice game by Kyle Hamilton, who's showing that he is the leader of this Baltimore defense. He can't remember his stats exactly, but he was all over the field, and he is, I believe, wearing the green dot. So he actually is like the captain of the defense now over Roquan Smith. So that's very interesting to see for a very young superstar.
Yeah, and that's really crazy because you almost always see the linebackers wear them.
Yeah.
It's really rare you see it outside the linebackers. Love Kyle Hamilton. So much respect for him, but it almost brings a tear to my eye every time we talk about how good he is, because the Vikings had him. He was right here. He was in our hands, and we said, let's trade the 12th pick to the Lions. Because why not? I still, to this day, don't get it. But we'll have to see if Lamar can keep going with his MVP candidacy against a team who I think has a dark horse MVP candidate in Saquon Barkley when they face the Eagles next week. But that was our recap for the 2024 NFL season, Week 12. Make sure you stay tuned in when we talk about the Baltimore Ravens versus Philadelphia Eagles game and all the other games of Week 13 tomorrow and next episode. But until then, don't forget
to eat the W.